I was standing in my driveway, staring at the empty space where my tractor should have been, when I realized the HOA had finally gone too far. My name is Marcus Webb, and I had been living in the Riverside Heights subdivision outside Boulder, Colorado for the past 8 years. The neighborhood was one of those cookie-cutter developments that sprouted up in the early 2000s, with identical two-story houses painted in varying shades of beige and tan. But my property was different. When I bought the land, it had been grandfathered in before the HOA regulations took full effect, which meant my 5-acre lot sat at the edge of the development with considerably more freedom than my neighbors enjoyed. That freedom included the small water treatment facility I operated on the back 3 acres of my property, a business I had inherited from my father 15 years ago. The facility was not some massive industrial complex. It was a modest operation that purified and pumped groundwater from the natural aquifer beneath our area. What made it significant was that Riverside Heights, in all their infinite wisdom during construction, had decided to save money by contracting with private water suppliers rather than connecting to the municipal system. That private supplier was me. Every single house in the development, all 237 of them, received their water from my facility through a network of underground pipes my father had helped install decades ago. But apparently, that did not matter to Patricia Moorhead, the HOA president. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number for the towing company listed on the citation stuck to my mailbox. A bored-sounding woman answered on the 3rd ring. "Yeah, this is Marcus Webb on Elderberry Lane. Someone towed my tractor this morning and I need to know where it is. Hold on." I heard the clicking of a keyboard. "Yeah, we got a John Deere 5075E here, towed from 1547 Elderberry Lane at 6:45 this morning. You can pick it up at our impound lot on Industrial Drive. That will be $450 for the tow, plus $75 per day for storage." $450? Are you serious? Who authorized this tow? Says here it was requested by the Riverside Heights HOA for violation of community standards, Section 12, subsection 4. Something about commercial vehicles visible from the street. I felt my jaw clench. That tractor was parked in my driveway on my property, and it is not a commercial vehicle, it is farm equipment. "Sir, I just drive the truck. You will need to take that up with whoever called us. You want the address for the impound lot or not?" I took down the information and hung up, my mind already racing. The tractor was essential for maintaining the water facility. I used it to access the filtration systems, transport equipment, and maintain the access roads on my property. Without it, I would have to rent equipment at ridiculous rates, all because Patricia had decided to flex her authority. I walked back into my house and grabbed my keys. The impound lot was a 20-minute drive, and I wanted to see this situation for myself before I did anything else. As I drove, I called my lawyer, Tom Chen, who had helped me navigate HOA disputes before. "Marcus, what is going on?" Tom answered, his voice professional but friendly. "Patricia had my tractor towed this morning, claimed it violated some rule about commercial vehicles." Tom was quiet for a moment. "The John Deere you use for the water facility maintenance. That is the one. And she is aware that you operate the water treatment facility that supplies the entire neighborhood? She has been aware of it for the 3 years she has been HOA president." "Never been an issue before," Tom sighed. "This sounds personal. Have you two had any recent conflicts?" I thought back to the HOA meeting 2 weeks ago. Patricia had proposed a special assessment of $3,000 per household to install decorative street lamps throughout the neighborhood. I had been the only homeowner to show up and vote against it, arguing that the current lighting was perfectly adequate and that the assessment was excessive. Patricia had not taken my opposition well, especially when I pointed out that the company she wanted to hire was owned by her brother-in-law. "We might have had some disagreement at the last meeting," I admitted. "Of course you did." "All right, here is what we are going to do. pay the impound fee and get your tractor back. Keep all the receipts. Then I want you to send me a copy of your property deed, the original water supply contract with the HOA, and any documentation you have about the tractor and its use. I will review everything and we will figure out our next move. Tom, that contract is 30 years old. My dad signed it with the original developer. Even better, old contracts like that usually have provisions that newer HOAs forget about. Send me everything you have. I agreed and hung up as I pulled into the impound lot. The facility was exactly what you would expect. A chain-link fence topped with barbed wire surrounding rows of vehicles in various states of disrepair. My tractor sat near the front gate, looking absurdly out of place next to the beat-up sedans and stripped trucks. The woman in the office barely looked up as I walked in. "Help you? I am here for the John Deere that was brought in this morning, $450. I handed over my credit card, wincing at the charge. "I need a detailed receipt showing who authorized the tow." She printed out a receipt and slid it across the counter. Sure enough, Patricia Moorhead's name was listed as the requesting party, along with her signature. I took a photo of the document before pocketing the original. 20 minutes later, I was driving my tractor back home, taking side streets to avoid the main roads. The whole situation was absurd. I was a 42-year-old man who had lived in this neighborhood for nearly a decade, paid my HOA dues on time every month, maintained my property meticulously, and provided an essential service to every single resident. And now I was being harassed over a tractor that was barely visible from the street. When I pulled into my driveway, I noticed a silver Lexus parked in front of my house. Patricia sat in the driver's seat, her phone pressed to her ear. She was a woman in her mid-50s with severely cut blonde hair and the kind of permanent scowl that suggested she had been complaining about something since birth. When she saw me on the tractor, she quickly ended her call and stepped out of her car. "Mr. Webb, I see you retrieved your commercial vehicle from impound." I turned off the tractor and climbed down. "Patricia, that tractor is farm equipment used for maintaining my water treatment facility. You know, the facility that supplies water to your house and everyone else's in this neighborhood." She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. According to Section 12, subsection 4 of our community guidelines, commercial vehicles are not permitted to be visible from any public street. Your tractor was clearly visible from Elderberry Lane. It was in my driveway, which is on my private property. Your driveway is visible from the street, which makes it subject to community standards. I am simply enforcing the rules that all residents agreed to follow. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my temper in check. "Patricia, we both know this is about the vote at the last meeting. You are upset because I opposed your street lamp assessment." Her expression hardened. "This has nothing to do with that meeting. This is about maintaining the aesthetic standards of our community. Riverside Heights is a premium development, and we cannot have industrial equipment sitting in driveways like we are some kind of rural farm town. I have been parking that tractor in my driveway for 8 years. Why is it suddenly a problem now?" "Because I was not aware of the violation until recently. Now that I am aware, I have a responsibility to enforce our community guidelines. If I make an exception for you, I would have to make exceptions for everyone." "An exception?" "Patricia, I own and operate the water treatment facility that this entire neighborhood depends on. That tractor is essential equipment for maintaining that facility. If something breaks down and I cannot access the equipment because you have had my tractor towed, this whole neighborhood will be without water." She crossed her arms. "Then I suggest you park your commercial vehicle somewhere that is not visible from the street. Perhaps you could build a garage or storage building in your backyard. Of course, you would need to submit plans for HOA approval first, and there would be architectural review fees." I stared at her, realizing that this was not just about the tractor or the vote. This was about power. Patricia wanted to establish dominance, to remind me that she was in charge, regardless of the fact that I literally controlled the water supply. I will tell you what, Patricia. I am going to park this tractor wherever I need to park it to do my job. And if you have it towed again, I will sue you personally and the HOA for interference with essential utility operations. My lawyer is already reviewing the situation. Her smile widened. Sue all you want, Mr. Webb. I have the full support of the HOA board, and we have legal counsel on retainer. I am sure a judge will agree that community standards apply equally to all residents, regardless of what business they operate. She got back in her Lexus and drove away, leaving me standing in my driveway, furious and frustrated. I spent the rest of the morning documenting everything. I took photos of my tractor parked in the driveway, showing how it was barely visible from the street due to the landscaping. I photographed the citation that had been left on my mailbox. I scanned the impound receipt. Then I went into my office and started digging through the filing cabinets, where my father had kept all the original documents related to the water facility. The contract I found was even better than I remembered. My father had negotiated it directly with the development company in 1994, before the HOA even existed. The terms were clear. In exchange for installing and maintaining the water treatment facility, my family would receive guaranteed access to the property, including all necessary easements and accommodations for equipment, vehicles, and personnel required to maintain continuous water service. The contract also included a clause stating that any interference with facility operations could result in immediate suspension of water service until the interference was resolved. I scanned the entire document and emailed it to Tom, along with all the photos and receipts from the morning. He called me back within an hour. Marcus, this contract is gold. The HOA cannot interfere with your facility operations, and that includes towing equipment you need to maintain the system. That clause about easements and accommodations essentially gives you immunity from most HOA restrictions when it comes to your business operations. So what do we do? First, I am going to send a formal letter to Patricia and the HOA board, explaining that their actions violated your contract and demanding reimbursement for the impound fees. I am also going to put them on notice that any future interference will result in immediate legal action and potential suspension of water service. Can I actually do that? Shut off their water? According to this contract, yes. If they interfere with your operations, you have the right to suspend service until the interference stops. Now, I am not saying you should actually do it, because that would create a whole mess of other problems. But the threat alone should be enough to make them back off. Patricia does not strike me as someone who backs off easily. Then we will cross that bridge when we come to it. For now, let me send this letter and see how they respond. In the meantime, park your tractor wherever you need to park it and document everything. If they tow it again, we will have even more ammunition for a lawsuit. I thanked Tom and hung up, feeling slightly better but still on edge. I knew Patricia well enough to know that she would not accept this quietly. She was the type of person who needed to win every battle, regardless of the cost. Sure enough, 3 days later I woke up to find my tractor gone again. This time I did not even bother calling the impound lot. I called Tom directly. "She towed it again," I said as soon as he answered. "Are you kidding me? Even after the letter I sent?" "Apparently she did not care about your letter. The tractor was here when I went to bed last night and it is gone this morning." Tom was quiet for a moment, and I could hear the anger in his voice when he spoke. "Okay, this is beyond harassment now. This is intentional interference with utility operations. I want you to document everything again, get the tractor back, and keep detailed records of all your expenses. We are going to file a lawsuit against Patricia personally and the HOA for damages, and I am also going to recommend that you send a formal notice to all residents warning them that continued HOA interference may result in service disruptions. You want me to threaten to shut off the water. I want you to warn them that the HOA's actions are jeopardizing their water service. There is a difference. You are not threatening anyone. You are simply explaining the reality of the situation. If Patricia keeps towing your essential equipment, you may not be able to maintain the facility properly, which could lead to service issues. That is just a fact. I saw his point. All right, I will draft something and send it to you for review. Good, and Marcus. Start keeping a daily log of every interaction you have with the HOA, every piece of mail they send, every citation, everything. We are going to need a clear timeline of harassment when this goes to court. I retrieved my tractor from the impound lot again, this time paying $525 because of the storage fees. The clerk recognized me and actually looked sympathetic. "Second time this month?" she asked as she processed my payment. "Second time this week." She shook her head. "I have seen some petty HOA stuff, but this is ridiculous. You should fight it." "I am working on it." When I got home, I parked the tractor in my driveway, took extensive photos, and then sat down to write the letter Tom had suggested. I kept it professional and factual. "Dear Riverside Heights residents, this letter is to inform you of an ongoing situation that may affect your water service. As many of you may know, I own and operate the water treatment facility that supplies all residences in Riverside Heights. This facility has been operating continuously for over 30 years, providing reliable, high-quality water service to our community. Recently, the HOA has repeatedly towed essential maintenance equipment from my property, claiming violations of community standards. This equipment is necessary for routine maintenance and emergency repairs to the water treatment facility. Without access to this equipment, my ability to maintain continuous water service may be compromised. I have attempted to resolve this situation directly with the HOA board, but these attempts have been unsuccessful. My attorney has sent formal correspondence to the HOA explaining that their actions violate the original water supply contract and may jeopardize essential utility operations. I want to assure all residents that I am committed to providing uninterrupted water service. However, I also want you to be aware that the HOA's continued interference with facility operations may result in service disruptions that are beyond my control. If you have concerns about this situation, I encourage you to contact the HOA board directly. Sincerely, Marcus Webb, Riverside Heights Water Treatment Facility. I sent the draft to Tom, who approved it with minor edits. Then I printed out 237 copies and spent the evening driving through the neighborhood, placing one in every mailbox. The response was immediate and explosive. The next morning, my phone started ringing at 7. The first call was from my neighbor, David Patel, who lived 3 houses down. "Marcus, I just read your letter. Is this for real? Patricia is messing with our water supply. She has had my maintenance tractor towed twice in the past week. I cannot do my job if she keeps taking my equipment." "That is insane. Does the rest of the board know about this?" "I have no idea. Patricia seems to be acting on her own authority." "Well, she is about to hear from a lot of people. My wife is already posting about this in the neighborhood Facebook group." Over the next few hours, I received dozens of calls and messages from concerned residents. Most were supportive, angry at the HOA for jeopardizing something as essential as water service over what they saw as a petty dispute. A few were hostile, accusing me of fear-mongering and trying to manipulate the situation. But the overall sentiment was clear. People were worried and they wanted answers. By that afternoon, Patricia had posted a response in the neighborhood Facebook group. I did not have Facebook myself, but several neighbors forwarded me screenshots. "Residents of Riverside Heights," her post began. "You may have received a letter from Marcus Webb attempting to frighten you about your water service. I want to assure you that your water supply is not at risk. Mr. Webb is attempting to use fear tactics to avoid complying with community standards that all residents must follow. The HOA has not interfered with his water treatment facility in any way. We have simply enforced existing rules about commercial vehicles being visible from the street. Mr. Webb has ample space on his property to store his equipment out of sight, but he has chosen not to do so. This is not an HOA problem. This is Mr. Webb refusing to follow the same rules as everyone else. The HOA board stands behind our decision to enforce community standards equally for all residents. I read the post and felt my blood pressure rise. She was gaslighting the entire neighborhood, pretending that towing my essential equipment was not interfering with facility operations. Before I could formulate a response, Tom called. "Have you seen Patricia's Facebook post? Just read it." She is digging herself deeper. That post is basically an admission that she knows the tractor is essential equipment and she is towing it anyway. Save screenshots of everything. This is all going to be evidence. Tom, I am getting calls from neighbors all day. This is turning into a circus. I know, and I am sorry about that. But here is the thing, public pressure is actually working in your favor. The more residents who are aware of the situation and concerned about it, the more pressure there is on the HOA board to rein Patricia in. Has anyone from the board reached out to you? Not yet. They will. In the meantime, I am drafting a formal lawsuit. We are going to file within the week if this does not get resolved. That evening, I received a call from a number I did not recognize. When I answered, a man's voice greeted me. "Mr. Webb, this is Richard Caldwell. I am on the HOA board, serving as treasurer. Do you have a few minutes to talk?" "Sure." "I want to start by saying that I was not aware of the situation with your tractor until I saw your letter this evening. I have since spoken with the other board members and none of us were consulted before Patricia had your equipment towed. That was interesting. So she is acting without board approval? It appears that way. Look, I am going to be honest with you. Patricia has been increasingly difficult to work with over the past year. She makes decisions without consulting the rest of us, and when we question her, she accuses us of not supporting her leadership. The street lamp assessment was a perfect example. Most of the board thought it was excessive, but she pushed it through anyway. Why do not you remove her as president? Richard sighed. It is complicated. Our bylaws require a majority vote of homeowners to remove a board member, and organizing that kind of vote is nearly impossible. Most people do not pay attention to HOA politics until something directly affects them. Well, something is directly affecting them now, their water supply. Exactly, which is why I am calling. I want to try to resolve this before it escalates further. What would it take to make this situation right? I thought about it. First, Patricia needs to stop towing my tractor. Second, I want reimbursement for all the impound fees I have paid. Third, I want a written acknowledgement from the HOA that my water treatment facility operations are exempt from standard vehicle restrictions due to the original supply contract. Those all seem reasonable. Let me talk to the rest of the board. We have an emergency meeting scheduled for tomorrow night. Can you attend? Will Patricia be there? She is the board president, so yes, but the rest of us will be there too, and I promise you will get a fair hearing. I agreed and hung up, feeling cautiously optimistic. Maybe the situation could be resolved without a lawsuit after all. The emergency HOA meeting was held at the community clubhouse, a building that mostly sat empty except for monthly board meetings and the occasional neighborhood event. When I arrived, the parking lot was packed. Apparently, word had spread, and residents wanted to see how this played out. The clubhouse meeting room was set up with a long table at the front for the board members and rows of folding chairs for residents. Every seat was taken, and people lined the walls. I spotted Patricia at the center of the board table, her expression carefully neutral. Richard Caldwell sat to her right, along with 3 other board members I recognized but did not know well. Patricia called the meeting to order and immediately launched into her prepared remarks. Thank you all for coming this evening. I know there has been some concern about the recent enforcement actions regarding Mr. Webb's commercial vehicle. I want to start by assuring everyone that the HOA's actions have been entirely appropriate and in accordance with our community guidelines. Mr. Webb operates a business on his property, and like any business owner, he needs to comply with local regulations. The tractor in question is a commercial vehicle that has been repeatedly parked in plain view of the street, which violates our community standards. We have offered Mr. Webb multiple solutions, including building a storage facility on his property to keep the vehicle out of sight, but he has refused to cooperate. I raised my hand, but Patricia ignored me and continued. The letter that Mr. Webb distributed to the community was inflammatory and misleading. At no point has the HOA interfered with water service or the operations of his facility. We have simply asked him to park his commercial vehicle in a location that complies with community standards. That is not true, I said loudly, standing up. You did not ask me to park anywhere. You had my tractor towed without warning twice, costing me nearly $1,000 in fees. That tractor is essential equipment for maintaining the water treatment facility that supplies this entire neighborhood. Patricia's face reddened. Mr. Webb, you are out of order. Residents must be recognized by the chair before speaking. Then recognize me. You will have an opportunity to speak during the public comment period. Richard Caldwell leaned forward. Patricia, given the circumstances, maybe we should let Mr. Webb address the board now. This is why we are all here. Patricia shot him a look but gestured for me to continue. I stayed standing so everyone could see me. Here are the facts. I own and operate the water treatment facility on my property that has been supplying Riverside Heights with water for over 30 years. My father built that facility and negotiated a contract with the original developer that guaranteed our family would have full access to our property with all necessary accommodations for equipment and operations. That contract is still legally binding. The tractor that Patricia has had towed twice is not some commercial truck I use for a side business. It is farm equipment that I use specifically for maintaining the water facility. I use it to access the filtration systems, transport supplies, maintain access roads, and respond to emergencies. Without that tractor, my ability to maintain reliable water service is significantly compromised. I pulled out my phone and held it up. I have the original contract here scanned. It explicitly states that the HOA cannot interfere with facility operations, and that includes the equipment I need to do my job. When Patricia had my tractor towed, she violated that contract. My lawyer has already sent formal notice, and we are prepared to file a lawsuit if this continues. A murmur ran through the crowd. I saw several residents nodding in agreement. Furthermore, I continued, I want to address Patricia's claim that she offered me solutions. That is false. The first time my tractor was towed, she showed up at my house and told me I needed to build a garage or storage building, which would require submitting plans for architectural review and paying fees to the HOA. She was essentially demanding that I spend thousands of dollars to solve a problem she created. The second time my tractor was towed, there was no warning at all. I woke up and it was gone. Patricia stood up, her face now fully flushed. Mr. Webb, you are twisting the facts. This is about community standards, not about your water facility. You are using fear tactics to avoid accountability. Fear tactics. I turned to face the crowd. How many of you are concerned about your water service after learning that the HOA has been towing essential maintenance equipment? Show of hands. Nearly every hand in the room went up. I turned back to Patricia. That is not fear tactics. That is legitimate concern about an essential utility, and the reason people are concerned is because your actions are jeopardizing that utility. Richard Caldwell cleared his throat. Patricia, I think we need to address the contract Mr. Webb mentioned. Were you aware of the original water supply agreement when you had his tractor towed? Patricia sat down slowly. I was aware that Mr. Webb operates a water treatment facility. I was not aware of any special contract that exempts him from community standards. Then maybe you should have checked before taking action, Richard said, his voice firm. Mr. Webb, can you send a copy of that contract to the board? My lawyer already sent it to Patricia 3 days before the second tow. Richard turned to Patricia, his expression darkening. You received a legal letter with a contract and you still had his equipment towed again. Patricia crossed her arms. I consulted with our HOA attorney, who advised me that community standards apply equally to all residents, regardless of what business they operate. The contract Mr. Webb is referring to is over 30 years old and does not supersede current HOA regulations. Actually, it does, I said. The contract was signed before the HOA existed, and it includes specific language about maintenance and operations taking precedence over future community restrictions. My lawyer is confident that it would hold up in court. Another board member, a woman named Susan Rodriguez, spoke up. Patricia, why did not you bring this to the full board before taking action? This seems like the kind of decision that should involve all of us. Because it was a straightforward enforcement of existing rules, I did not think it required board approval. You had his equipment towed twice and cost him $1,000, and you did not think that required board approval? Susan's voice was incredulous. That is exactly the kind of decision that requires board consultation. The meeting devolved into arguing among the board members, with Patricia becoming increasingly defensive while Richard and Susan pressed her on why she had acted unilaterally. Meanwhile, residents in the audience started shouting their own opinions, some supporting me, others defending the HOA's right to enforce standards. Finally, Richard stood up and raised his voice. All right, everyone, please settle down. Here is what we are going to do. The board is going to take a 15-minute recess to discuss this situation privately. When we come back, we will have a decision. The board members filed out of the room into a smaller office area, leaving the rest of us in the meeting room. I was immediately surrounded by neighbors wanting to express support or ask questions. David Patel clapped me on the shoulder. That was intense, man, but you handled it well. Thanks. I just hope the board sees reason. If they do not, you have the whole neighborhood on your side. Did you see how many people raised their hands? When the board returned, Patricia looked like she had swallowed something bitter. Richard took the lead in announcing their decision. After discussion, the board has decided on the following actions. First, effective immediately, the HOA will reimburse Mr. Webb for all impound fees related to his tractor. Second, the board acknowledges that Mr. Webb's water treatment facility operations are subject to the original supply contract, which takes precedence over standard HOA vehicle restrictions. Third, the board will work with Mr. Webb and his attorney to draft a formal amendment to our community guidelines that clarifies the exemptions for essential utility operations. Fourth, and finally, the board is formally censuring President Moorhead for taking unilateral action without board consultation on a matter that significantly affects the community. Patricia looked like she wanted to argue, but the other board members were clearly united against her. She remained silent, her jaw clenched. Richard continued. Mr. Webb, we apologize for the inconvenience and frustration this situation has caused. It should never have escalated to this point. We hope this resolution is satisfactory. I nodded. It is, provided there are no further incidents. I just want to do my job and maintain reliable water service for everyone. Understood. We will have the reimbursement check for you within the week, and we will be in touch about the guidelines amendment. The meeting adjourned, and I left feeling like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Several residents stopped me in the parking lot to shake my hand or express relief that the situation was resolved. But as I drove home, I could not shake the feeling that Patricia was not going to let this go. I was proven right 2 weeks later. I woke up one morning to find that my water facility's main control panel had been vandalized. Someone had broken the lock on the equipment shed and smashed the panel with what looked like a sledgehammer. The damage was extensive, sparks still occasionally flickering from the destroyed circuitry. I immediately called the sheriff's office. While I waited for the deputy to arrive, I assessed the damage. The control panel managed the automatic systems that regulated water pressure, monitored filtration, and controlled the pumps. Without it, I would have to manually operate everything, which was possible but extremely labor-intensive, and meant I would essentially have to live at the facility 24 hours a day to prevent problems. Deputy Sarah Hernandez arrived within 30 minutes. She was a veteran officer who I had met a few times at community events. "Mr. Webb, what happened here?" I showed her the damage and explained the situation. She took extensive photos and notes. "Do you have any idea who might have done this?" "I have a pretty good suspicion, but I do not have proof." "Want to share that suspicion?" I told her about the ongoing conflict with Patricia and the HOA, the towed tractor, and the contentious meeting. Deputy Hernandez listened carefully, then asked, "Does your facility have security cameras?" "No, I never thought I would need them. You might want to consider installing some now. In the meantime, I will file a report for vandalism and criminal mischief. The damage you are describing is probably a felony given the value of the equipment. Do you have an estimate on repair costs?" "The control panel alone is probably $15,000, plus installation. But the bigger issue is that I cannot operate the facility automatically until it is replaced. I am going to have to call an emergency technician and probably rent temporary equipment." "How long until you can get it repaired?" "A few days at minimum, maybe longer depending on parts availability. In the meantime, I will have to monitor everything manually to keep the water running." "So this vandalism is essentially affecting water service for the entire neighborhood?" "Potentially, yes. If I cannot monitor the systems properly, there could be pressure drops, contamination risks, or complete service interruptions." Deputy Hernandez frowned. "Okay, that changes things. This is not just property damage anymore. This is tampering with a utility system, which is a much more serious crime. I am going to need to call in a detective." She made some calls while I contacted my emergency equipment supplier. By the time the detective arrived, I had arranged for a technician to come out that afternoon with temporary monitoring equipment, but it was going to cost me $3,000 just for the rental and setup. Detective Mike Torres was a serious man in his 40s who spent an hour examining the crime scene and asking detailed questions. When I mentioned Patricia and the HOA situation, his interest sharpened. "So you have been in an ongoing conflict with your HOA president. She has been censured by the board for her actions against you, and now your facility has been vandalized in a way that directly impacts your ability to provide water service." "That is correct. That is a pretty compelling motive. But like you said, we need proof. I am going to request a search warrant for Mrs. Moorhead's property and vehicle. If she did this, there might be physical evidence like tool marks, clothing with debris, or the tools themselves." "You really think you can get a warrant based on suspicion?" "Given the totality of circumstances, and the fact that this is tampering with a utility system that affects hundreds of people, yes, I think a judge will sign off on it, but it might take a day or two. In the meantime, I had to deal with the immediate crisis." The technician arrived and set up temporary equipment, but it was a band-aid solution at best. I had to check the systems every few hours, adjusting pressure manually and monitoring the filtration levels constantly. I barely slept for the next 2 days. On the third day, Detective Torres called me. "Mr. Webb, we executed the search warrant this morning. We found a sledgehammer in Mrs. Moorhead's garage with fresh paint chips that appear to match your equipment shed door. We also found boots with what looks like the same type of gravel that is around your facility. We have arrested Mrs. Moorhead on charges of felony vandalism, criminal mischief, and tampering with a utility system." I felt a strange mix of vindication and disbelief. She actually did it. Looks that way. She is denying everything, of course, but the physical evidence is pretty damning. She is being processed now, and there will be an arraignment tomorrow. Given the seriousness of the charges and the impact on the community, the DA is not going to be inclined to go easy on her. What happens now? The legal process will take time. But I wanted you to know that we are taking this very seriously. Tampering with a water system is not just property crime, it is a public safety issue. After I hung up, I sat in my office for a long time trying to process everything. Patricia had been so fixated on winning, on asserting her authority, that she had committed multiple felonies. It was almost incomprehensible. Word spread through the neighborhood quickly. By that evening, the local news had picked up the story. HOA president arrested for vandalizing water supply was the headline on the Boulder County News website. My phone rang constantly with reporters wanting comments, neighbors expressing shock, and even some national media outlets asking for interviews. I declined most of the interview requests, but I did agree to talk to the local paper. The reporter, Jennifer Walsh, came to my house the next morning. "Mr. Webb, can you walk me through what happened?" I gave her a detailed account of the past month, the towed tractor, the HOA meeting, the vandalism, and Patricia's arrest. Jennifer took careful notes. "This is quite a story," she said. A utility provider in conflict with his own HOA, and it escalates to the point where the HOA president allegedly commits a felony. "Have you heard from the rest of the HOA board?" Richard Caldwell called me yesterday to apologize on behalf of the board. "They are holding another emergency meeting to figure out next steps, including whether they need to remove Patricia as president now that she has been arrested." What do you want to see happen? I thought about it. Honestly, I just want to get my facility repaired, get back to providing reliable water service, and move on with my life. I never wanted any of this drama. I just wanted to do my job. The article was published 2 days later and went viral. It was picked up by national news outlets, shared thousands of times on social media, and became a rallying point for people frustrated with overzealous HOA enforcement. I received emails from all over the country, people sharing their own HOA horror stories and expressing support. But locally, the situation was still unfolding. Patricia made bail but was required to stay away from my property as a condition of her release. The HOA board held their emergency meeting and voted unanimously to suspend her as president pending the outcome of the criminal case. Richard Caldwell was appointed interim president. The next challenge was getting my facility fully repaired. The control panel I needed was a specialized piece of equipment with a 6-week lead time. I could not operate on temporary equipment for that long without risking serious service problems. I called every supplier I could find, trying to locate a panel in stock somewhere, and finally found one at a facility in Wyoming that was being decommissioned. It cost me $22,000 to purchase and ship, but it meant I could have my facility fully operational again within a week. While I waited for the panel to arrive, I continued monitoring everything manually. It was exhausting work. I was sleeping maybe 4 hours a night, constantly checking pressure levels, filtration rates, and pump operations. Several neighbors brought me meals and coffee, which I appreciated more than they knew. On the 5th day after the vandalism, something went wrong. I was doing my evening rounds when I noticed the pressure in the main distribution line was dropping faster than it should. I checked all the usual suspects: pump operations, valve settings, filtration flow. Everything looked normal on my end, which meant the problem was somewhere in the underground pipe network. I grabbed my equipment and drove through the neighborhood in my truck, using a portable pressure gauge to test the system at various access points. I finally found the problem near the intersection of Maple Street and Birch Avenue, a major pipe leak that was dumping hundreds of gallons per minute into the ground. The soil above the pipe was already saturated and beginning to collapse, creating a sinkhole about 5 feet across. I immediately shut down the flow to that section of the pipe, which meant cutting water service to about 40 houses. Then I called Richard Caldwell. "Richard, we have a major pipe leak on Maple Street. I have had to shut down service to the entire south section of the neighborhood while I repair it. How long will people be without water? Depends on the extent of the damage. If I can access the pipe easily, maybe 6 to 8 hours. If it is worse than it looks, could be a full day. Do what you need to do. I will send out a notification to affected residents. I called my equipment supplier again, this time requesting an emergency excavator rental and a pipe repair crew. They said they could have someone out within 2 hours. While I waited, I set up safety barriers around the sinkhole and posted notices on the doors of affected houses. The repair crew arrived just after midnight. We spent the next 7 hours digging down to the pipe, cutting out the damaged section, and installing new pipe. It was cold, muddy, miserable work, but we finally got it done. By 7 in the morning, I was able to restore water service to the affected houses. I went home, took a shower, and collapsed into bed. I slept for 12 hours straight. When I finally woke up, I had missed calls and messages from dozens of people. Most were neighbors thanking me for fixing the leak so quickly. A few were complaints about the service interruption, which I expected. But one message stood out. It was from Detective Torres. Mr. Webb, please call me when you get this. We have some new information about your case. I called him back immediately. Detective, what is going on? We have been investigating Mrs. Moorhead's phone and computer records as part of the criminal case. We found some interesting communications. It appears she was in contact with someone about your water facility in the days leading up to the vandalism. Text messages that suggest she was planning something beyond just damaging the control panel. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? We found messages where she discussed ways to cause problems with your water system. One message specifically mentions pipes and pressure issues. Mr. Webb, is there any possibility that the pipe leak you just repaired was not accidental? I thought back to the leak. The pipe had burst at a joint, which could happen naturally due to age and pressure, but the timing was suspicious, happening just days after the vandalism. I do not know, I admitted. It could have been natural failure or it could have been deliberately damaged. I would need to examine the pipe section more closely. Do you still have the damaged pipe? It should be with the repair crew. They were going to dispose of it, but I can call and tell them to hold on to it. Please do that. I want to have it examined by an expert. If someone deliberately damaged that pipe, we are looking at additional charges. I called the repair crew and arranged to pick up the damaged pipe section. Then I sat down and tried to wrap my head around the situation. If Patricia had not only vandalized my control panel but also sabotaged the pipe system, she had not just been trying to harass me anymore. She had been trying to cause a complete failure of the water system, potentially putting the entire neighborhood at risk. The pipe analysis took a week. When Detective Torres called with the results, his voice was grim. Mr. Webb, the forensic engineer, found clear evidence of intentional damage. Someone used a diamond blade saw to partially cut through the pipe at the joint, weakening it to the point where it would fail under normal pressure. The cut marks are recent, probably within a few days of the failure. So Patricia sabotaged the pipe. We are still building the case, but yes, that is where the evidence is pointing. Combined with the text messages and the timing, it is pretty clear. We are going to be adding additional charges: attempted destruction of a utility system, reckless endangerment, and possibly conspiracy if we can prove she had help. This is insane. She was willing to leave 200 families without water just to get back at me. Some people do not handle losing control very well, and from what I have seen, Mrs. Moorhead is definitely one of those people. The good news is that with these additional charges, she is looking at serious prison time if convicted. Over the next few weeks, the case against Patricia built steadily. Prosecutors charged her with multiple felonies, and the evidence was overwhelming. The sledgehammer with paint chips, the text messages discussing sabotage, the deliberately damaged pipe, all pointed to a calculated campaign to destroy my facility. Meanwhile, life started returning to normal, or at least as normal as it could be given the circumstances. The new control panel was installed and working perfectly. The HOA board, under Richard's leadership, formally amended the community guidelines to exempt my facility operations from vehicle and equipment restrictions. They also voted to permanently remove Patricia as president and initiated the process to ban her from holding any future board positions. The preliminary hearing was set for May. I had to testify about the damage to my facility and the impact on water service. Patricia sat at the defense table with her lawyer, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. She had aged noticeably in the past few months, her face drawn and tired. The judge heard the evidence and ruled that there was sufficient cause to proceed to trial. Patricia's lawyer tried to argue for reduced bail, but the prosecutor successfully argued that she posed a continued threat to essential infrastructure and public safety. Bail was maintained at $100,000, which Patricia's family had to scramble to pay. The trial itself was scheduled for August, which gave everyone a few months to breathe. I focused on my facility, performing routine maintenance and installing a comprehensive security system with cameras, motion sensors, and alarms. I also hired a part-time assistant, a young guy named Jake who was studying environmental engineering and wanted hands-on experience with water treatment systems. Life in Riverside Heights gradually settled. The drama had united the community in unexpected ways. People who had never talked to each other before were now chatting at mailboxes, sharing Patricia stories, and organizing neighborhood barbecues. The HOA itself became more transparent and collaborative, with Richard encouraging resident participation and regular communication. In early August, just 2 weeks before the trial was set to begin, Patricia's lawyer contacted the district attorney with a plea deal offer. She would plead guilty to all charges in exchange for a reduced sentence. The DA called me to get my input. "Mr. Webb, I want to know how you feel about this." The deal would put her in prison for 3 to 5 years, followed by probation. She would also be required to pay full restitution for all damages, which we estimate at around $60,000. If we go to trial, we might get a longer sentence, but there is always the risk of an acquittal or hung jury. I thought about it carefully. Will she be required to stay away from me and my property after she is released? Yes, we would include a permanent restraining order as part of the deal. Then I support accepting the plea. I do not want to drag this out longer than necessary. I just want to make sure she cannot come after me or my facility again. That is what I was hoping you would say. A trial would be stressful for everyone involved, and this way we guarantee a conviction and restitution. The plea hearing was held on August 15th. I sat in the courtroom gallery, watching as Patricia stood before the judge and admitted to vandalizing my facility, sabotaging the water pipe, and recklessly endangering public safety. The judge accepted the plea and sentenced her to 4 years in state prison, followed by 3 years of probation. She was also ordered to pay $63,000 in restitution and was permanently prohibited from holding any position of authority in any homeowners association. As the bailiff led Patricia away, she finally looked at me. There was no anger in her expression, just exhaustion and defeat. I felt no satisfaction in seeing her go to prison, just relief that it was finally over. After the hearing, Richard Caldwell approached me in the courthouse hallway. "Marcus, I just want to say thank you for how you handled all of this. You could have shut off the water the moment Patricia started harassing you and you would have been within your rights, but you kept service running even when it cost you time, money, and sleep. The neighborhood is lucky to have you." "I was just doing my job," I said. "But I appreciate you saying that. The board has been talking, and we want to do something to show our appreciation. We would like to cover the cost of your new security system and compensate you for the legal fees you incurred. It is the least we can do after everything you went through." "Richard, you do not have to do that. We want to. It has already been approved by the full board. Consider it an apology from Riverside Heights." I accepted gratefully, touched by the gesture. Over the next few months, the neighborhood held an appreciation barbecue in my honor, with dozens of families turning out to express their thanks. Kids played in the park, adults grilled burgers and hot dogs, and someone even made a cake decorated with a fondant tractor. Jake turned out to be an excellent assistant, quickly learning the intricacies of the water treatment system and showing genuine passion for the work. By October, he was handling most of the routine maintenance on his own, which freed me up to focus on long-term planning and improvements. I also started attending HOA meetings regularly, not as an adversary, but as an engaged community member. Richard and the other board members welcomed my input, and we worked together on several projects to improve the neighborhood, including a community garden and upgraded playground equipment. One evening in late November, I was doing a final check on the facility before heading home when my phone rang. It was Tom Chen, my lawyer. "Marcus, I just wanted to give you a heads up. Patricia's restitution payment came through today. The full $63,000 has been deposited into your account. Already, I thought that would take years. Apparently, her family liquidated some assets to pay it off immediately. I think they just want to be done with the whole situation. I can understand that. So this wraps up all the legal loose ends. How are you feeling?" I looked around the facility, listening to the steady hum of the pumps and filtration systems. Everything was running smoothly, efficiently, reliably, just like it should be. "I feel good, Tom, really good. This whole situation was a nightmare, but it made me appreciate what I have here. This facility, this work, this community, it all matters, and I am glad I fought for it. You should be proud. You stood up to someone who was abusing their power, and you did it without compromising your integrity or your commitment to the community. That is not easy." After we hung up, I finished my rounds and locked up the facility. As I drove home through the quiet streets of Riverside Heights, I saw lights in windows, families settling in for the evening, all of them using water that flowed through pipes I maintained, treated by systems I monitored, made possible by work I did every single day. Patricia had tried to use her authority to punish me for not backing down, not realizing that the thing she was trying to control was the very thing the community needed most. She had learned the hard way that you cannot bully someone who provides something essential, not without consequences. I pulled into my driveway and parked next to my tractor, which sat there proudly, exactly where it belonged. No citations, no threats, no tow trucks, just a piece of equipment doing its job like everything else should. The next few months were blissfully uneventful. Winter settled over Colorado, bringing snow and cold temperatures, but the water system handled it all without issues. I had winterized the pipes properly, and Jake proved to be reliable even in harsh weather, showing up every day to help with maintenance regardless of the conditions. In February, I received an unexpected letter from Patricia. It had been forwarded through her lawyer as the restraining order prohibited direct contact. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. The letter was handwritten, not typed, and the penmanship was shaky. "Mr. Webb, I am not writing this because I have to, but because I need to. You have every right to hate me for what I did, and I do not expect forgiveness. I wanted to explain, though I know it does not excuse anything. When I became HOA president, I thought I was finally in a position where I could make a real difference, where people would respect me and listen to my ideas. But I became obsessed with control, with winning every argument, with proving I was right. When you stood up to me at that meeting, it felt like a personal attack, like you were trying to undermine everything I had built. I know now that I was wrong. You were not attacking me, you were just standing up for yourself and your business, but I could not see that at the time. I let my pride and anger drive me to do terrible things, things I will regret for the rest of my life. I destroyed equipment that people depended on. I endangered families, including children. I became the kind of person I always claimed to hate, a bully. I am in prison now, and I deserve to be here. I hope that wherever you are, whatever you are doing, you are at peace. You did not deserve any of what I put you through. I am sorry, Patricia Moorhead." I read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and put it in a drawer. I did not know if Patricia's remorse was genuine or just another attempt at manipulation, but it did not really matter. The situation was over and I had moved on. Spring arrived, bringing warmer weather and the annual ritual of HOA elections. Richard Caldwell was elected to serve a full term as president, running unopposed. The first thing he did in his new role was propose a formal partnership agreement between the HOA and my water facility, establishing clear guidelines for cooperation, emergency procedures, and mutual support. The membership approved it unanimously. By summer, life in Riverside Heights felt completely transformed. The hostile, paranoid atmosphere that Patricia had created was gone, replaced by genuine community spirit. Neighbors helped each other with yard work, organized block parties, and looked out for each other's properties when people were on vacation. Jake finished his degree in environmental engineering and asked if he could stay on full-time as my business partner. I was thrilled. Having someone to share the workload and responsibility meant I could finally take a real vacation, something I had not done in years. We drew up a partnership agreement, and by September, Jake owned 20% of the business with an option to buy more over time. In October, the local newspaper did a follow-up story on the Patricia situation, checking in to see how the community had recovered. Jennifer Walsh came back to interview me, and we talked about the changes over the past year. So, Mr. Webb, looking back on everything that happened, do you have any regrets? Honestly, no. I wish the situation had not escalated the way it did, but I do not regret standing up for myself and my business. Sometimes you have to fight for what is right, even when it is difficult and uncomfortable. What advice would you give to other people dealing with difficult HOA situations? Document everything, know your rights, and do not be afraid to push back when the HOA oversteps. A lot of people just accept whatever the HOA says because they do not want confrontation. But HOAs are not above the law and board members are not dictators. If they are violating your rights or your contracts, you have every right to challenge them. And what about the HOA itself? How has Riverside Heights changed, night and day? Under Richard's leadership, the board has become transparent and collaborative. They listen to residents, they think carefully before taking action, and they focus on what actually matters: maintaining property values and quality of life. That is what an HOA should be doing, not harassing residents over petty violations. The article was published with the headline "From Crisis to Community: How Riverside Heights Recovered After HOA President's Crimes." It painted a positive picture of the neighborhood's transformation and positioned my story as a cautionary tale about what happens when HOA leaders abuse their authority. That November, exactly 1 year after Patricia's sentencing, the neighborhood held another barbecue. This one was not in my honor, just a regular community event. But as I stood there watching families laugh and kids play, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was what community was supposed to feel like: people coming together, supporting each other, building something worthwhile. David Patel walked over with 2 beers and handed me one. "Marcus, I have been meaning to ask. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you had just backed down, if you had built that storage shed and kept your tractor out of sight?" I sipped my beer and thought about it. Honestly, I do think about it sometimes. It would have been easier in the short term, less conflict, less stress. But it also would have set a bad precedent. Patricia would have learned that she could bully people into compliance, and she would have kept doing it to other residents. Sometimes the hard path is the right path. Well, I am glad you took the hard path. This neighborhood is better for it. As winter approached again, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened. The towed tractor, the vandalism, the trial, all of it seemed almost surreal now, like it had happened to someone else. But it had happened, and it had taught me valuable lessons about standing up for myself, about the importance of community, and about the difference between authority and abuse. The water treatment facility continued to operate smoothly, providing reliable service to every home in Riverside Heights. My tractor sat in my driveway whenever I needed it, and nobody said a word. The security system kept watch over the facility, though thankfully there had been no further incidents. Patricia remained in prison, serving her sentence. I did not think about her often, but when I did, I mostly felt sad. She had thrown away her reputation, her freedom, and her standing in the community because she could not handle being challenged. It was a waste and a warning. One evening in December, Richard called me with unexpected news. "Marcus, I wanted to give you a heads up before the next newsletter goes out. We have been in talks with 2 other nearby developments about potentially expanding your water service to cover their neighborhoods. They are having issues with their current supplier and are looking for alternatives. Would you be interested in taking that on?" I was surprised but intrigued. "How many additional households are we talking about?" "About 300 total between both developments. It would require some infrastructure expansion on your end, but they are willing to help fund the upgrades. I think it could be a really good opportunity for you and Jake." I told Richard I would think about it and discuss it with Jake. That night, we sat down and ran the numbers. Expanding the facility to handle 600 households would require significant investment, probably close to $200,000. But it would also triple our revenue and establish us as the primary water supplier for the entire area. What do you think? I asked Jake after we had reviewed all the projections. I think it is a huge opportunity. Risky, but potentially very rewarding. We would need to hire more staff, probably at least 2 more full-time people, but we could build something really substantial here. Let me talk to my bank about a business loan. If the numbers work, I say we do it. Over the next few months, we worked on the expansion plan. The bank approved the loan, the other developments signed supply contracts, and we broke ground on the facility upgrades in March. It was ambitious and more than a little scary, but it felt right. By the time summer arrived, the expansion was complete. Our facility now served 637 households across 3 developments, employed 4 full-time staff members, and generated annual revenue of over $800,000. Jake and I were no longer just running a small family business. We were operating a legitimate regional utility company. Through it all, the lesson from the Patricia situation stayed with me. Provide essential services well, stand up for your rights, and never let anyone bully you into compromising your principles. It was a lesson that served me well in business negotiations, in community interactions, and in life generally. 2 years after Patricia's sentencing, I received notification that she had been released on parole after serving her minimum sentence with good behavior. She moved out of state, apparently going to live with family in Arizona. I never heard from her again, which was fine with me. Riverside Heights continued to thrive. Property values increased steadily. New families moved in, and the community maintained the positive atmosphere that had developed after Patricia's removal. Richard served 2 successful terms as HOA president before stepping down to let someone else take over, and the board continued to operate with transparency and common sense. My tractor still sat in my driveway when I needed it for work, and every time I saw it there, I remembered the whole ridiculous situation that had started with Patricia deciding it was an eyesore. Sometimes the smallest conflicts reveal the biggest truths about people and power and community. Jake eventually bought up to 50% ownership in the business, making us equal partners. We continued expanding carefully, adding more developments to our service area and building a reputation for reliability and excellent customer service. The business that my father had started decades ago had become something neither of us could have imagined. A thriving regional utility company that served thousands of families. But despite all the growth and success, I never forgot where I started. One man with a tractor and a water treatment facility standing up to an HOA president who thought she could bully him into submission. She had been wrong, and she had paid dearly for that mistake. The story became something of a legend in our area, passed around at HOA meetings and community gatherings as a cautionary tale. People used it as an example of what happens when HOA boards forget that they are supposed to serve their communities, not rule them. And every single day, water flowed through pipes I maintained into homes throughout the region, providing one of life's most essential resources. That was my victory, not defeating Patricia or winning the legal battle, but continuing to do the work that mattered, serving my community, and building something lasting and worthwhile. The tractor still sat in my driveway, a symbol of everything I had fought for. And nobody ever again tried to tow it.